Boldwood presents Rendezvous in Cannes, written by Jennifer Bohnet and read by Julia Franklin. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Welcome to Cannes, in the month of May, in the year 2010. The day before she was due to fly to the south of France for the Cannes Film Festival, Carson was in Somerset, looking at a possible location for the latest film she was involved with as production designer. Marshland House lay at the end of a long drive, flanked by flowering white rhododendron bushes. From the outside, the brick-built Victorian mansion looked perfect for her purpose. The location agent had told her that the major part of the house was untouched since the 19th century, and, importantly for the film, the basement kitchen still boasted its original fixtures. Anna parked her car and glanced at her watch. 15 minutes before the agent was due. Time enough for her to have a quick look around the grounds on her own and take some photographs. Apart from the set designer needing some, she knew Leo would want to see photographs of the house and its location. A smile touched her lips as she thought about Leo. Just over 4 months ago, she'd thought she was as happy as she was ever going to be. Falling in love at 57 years old hadn't been on her radar. Not that it ever had been. Her default setting since her particularly disastrous teenage years had been the old saying, better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. So, instead of a husband and family, she had a successful career she enjoyed, her own home and money in the bank. If she'd ever felt that something was missing from her life, she'd firmly pushed the thought down and away. Everybody had regrets, didn't they? You learned to live with them. Then, at a swanky London party on New Year's Eve, mutual friends had introduced her to widower Leo Hunter. It was one of those rare occasions when two people connected, forming an instant friendship. Leo worked for one of the big 5 publishers and was intrigued by Anna's job in the film industry. The noise of the party had faded into the background as they talked and discovered things they had in common. 2 hours later, when Big Ben struck and welcomed in the new year, and fireworks lit up the night sky, Leo had taken her by the hand and pulled her towards him. Lifting her hand to his lips and placing a gentle kiss on it, all the time, his gaze never leaving her face, he'd said, "Happy New Year, Anna. I think we're going to have a wonderful year together." Unprepared for the feelings he'd stirred in her, Anna was wary when he telephoned the next day, inviting her to the theatre. But within days, she knew she'd fallen unequivocally in love with him. The realization in the following week that Leo felt the same way about her had been, and still was, overwhelming. Anna smiled at the memory of their first meeting, the way they just clicked. Within days, they were acting like lovesick teenagers. Unexpectedly, too, she'd found herself being accepted as part of a family when Leo introduced her to his 2 grown-up children, Luke and Alison, who unselfishly welcomed her presence in their father's life, pleased to see him happy again. With her own parents dead for years, it was a long time since Anna had had anything resembling a family unit in her life. Leo and his children were everything a proper family should be. Loving and close to each other, and, importantly, there for each other. A real, loving family, the like of which she'd long ago stopped wishing for in her own life, knowing it was an impossible dream. Wandering around the grounds of Marshland House, stopping to smell and admire the beautiful display of rhododendrons of different colours that were everywhere, Anna tried to banish all thoughts of Leo and concentrate instead on this latest film she was working on, In the Shadow of Mrs. Beeton, a costume drama based on the life of a little-known Victorian culinary expert, Mrs. Agnes Marshall. Even in pre-production days, it was already stirring up a lot of interest. With a script written by a famous writer and a couple of big-name stars being approached to play the principal roles, it was being tipped for box office success. Anna's mobile rang while she was standing looking out over the lake that was part of the landscaped gardens to the rear of the house. Leo. Taking a deep breath, Anna answered the phone, trying to speak naturally. But try as she might, she'd never yet managed to stop her heart thumping or her hands shaking whenever she heard or saw Leo. This time was no different. She hadn't felt this way about anyone since those long-ago giddy days of her first love. "Hi. How are you, my darling? Have I told you how much I miss you when we're not together?" "Missing you, too." "Is the house all the agent promised it would be?" Leo asked, knowing how important it was for Anna to find the right location. "If the inside of the house is as good as the outside and the grounds, it'll be perfect," Anna told him. "I'm glad I made the effort to come today. At least it's one less thing to worry about while I'm in Cannes." "Ah, Cannes," Leo said. There was a slight pause before he continued. "I sincerely hope you know what you're doing, Anna, my darling. Going back and raking up the past isn't always a good idea." Even from 200 miles away, Anna could hear the concern in his voice. "Leo, I've no intention of raking up the past, as you put it. I'm simply going to the film festival. I know I've managed to avoid it for 40 years, but it's time to lay the past to rest now. Besides, how could I refuse to go this year? I know I've been in the business for what seems like forever, but it's the first time since I started my own company 5 years ago that one of the films I've been production designer on is in competition at Cannes. This year I have to be there for the premiere of Future Promises. No excuse will be acceptable." Anna hesitated. "And there are certain ghosts I have to lay for both our sakes, Leo." She heard Leo sigh softly down the phone. "I just worry about you pulling the past into your present. I don't want you to be hurt." Anna smiled, picturing Leo and longing to feel his arms around her. She said softly, "I know. You are still joining me, aren't you?" she added anxiously. "I'm so looking forward to our first holiday together, and I can't wait to show off my own handsome leading man on the red carpet." "Of course I'm coming, and I'll be there as soon as I can get away," Leo promised. "But right now I must go. I'll ring you tomorrow to make sure you've arrived safely. Love you." "Love you, too." Anna smiled happily to herself, her hands trembling as she switched off her phone. Looking out over the countryside, Anna sighed, her fingers toying with the chain of the gold locket that she rarely took off. Was Leo right, inferring she was tempting fate returning to Cannes after all these years? Her nemesis was certainly powerful enough to rear up in protest and throw the errors of her past into her present. Maybe even destroy the future with Leo. It was a risk, though, she had to take to ensure a second chance at happiness. Surely, after 40 years, closure was a mere formality. Leo hadn't mentioned marriage in so many words yet, but Anna suspected, hoped, he would soon. Standing in the grounds of Marshland House, Anna resolved to talk to Leo again about her past, in detail. He deserved to know the whole truth. And where better to tell him than in the place where it had all begun? What she had told him so far had been the merest skeleton of events. Until she knew him better, she'd been afraid to tell him the whole sad story. But now she was confident of her strong love for him and his for her, She wanted him to know the complete story. She was determined to be totally honest with Leo. It was the only way. Hearing car tyres scrunch along the gravel on the drive, Anna made her way round to the front of the house, where the agent was parking his car alongside hers. An hour later, as the agent left for another appointment, Anna switched on the car radio and sat for a few moments writing up her notes, half listening to a news bulletin. Inside, the house had been everything she'd hoped it would be, and she'd instructed the agent to draw up a contract to allow filming to begin there in the autumn, and send it to her office. Now she was free to go to Cannes and do what she had to do before enjoying the festival and Leo's company when he arrived. The next moment, the voice of the news presenter made her catch her breath in shock. Some news just in. The respected French filmmaker Philippe Cambon has died in America. Responsible for some of the biggest blockbuster movies of the 20th century, he was recently awarded an Industry Lifetime Achievement BAFTA, which was to have been presented at this week's Cannes Film Festival. Automatically, Anna reached out and turned off the radio, before closing her eyes and leaning back against her seat, as a wave of numbness and unexpected desolation flooded her body. How could Philippe be dead? When she'd vowed this would be the year she'd confront her demons and lay the past to rest. Chapter 2. Daisy Harris dragged her suitcase through the crowded arrivals hall of Terminal 2 at Nice Airport and out onto the concourse, where she stopped to take a deep breath, look up at the azure blue sky, and feel the heat of the sun. After the stress of the last couple of days, it was just wonderful to be breathing in the air of the Riviera, a favourite place of hers. The plane from Bristol had been packed with both media people heading to the Cannes Film Festival and holidaymakers with young children. A peaceful flight it was not. Crying babies, toddlers who wouldn't sit still, and men with loud voices talking importantly to each other as they overindulged with G&Ts from the drinks trolley. Thankfully, Daisy hadn't known any of the journalists on board, so hadn't had to confide in anyone that she too was a bona fide reporter covering the festival, albeit for the first time. Seeing the length of the taxi queue, Daisy briefly toyed with the idea of taking the airport bus into Nice and picking up a taxi from there, but decided, as Nice was in the opposite direction to Cannes, it would only lengthen her travelling time and delay her getting to her sister's. Taxis were coming and going non-stop, and in the end, Daisy only had to wait for 15 minutes before she was opening the door of a smart Mercedes and telling the driver her sister's address. "Villa Flora, Cannes, please." The taxi fairly whizzed along the busy A7 autoroute, changing lanes with such alacrity that at times Daisy felt quite dizzy, as if she was on a switchback ride. It was 20 minutes before the driver swung across to the near side lane and took the Cannes exit, and Daisy told him the name of the boulevard the villa was situated on. 5 minutes later, a happy-to-be-alive Daisy grabbed her suitcase, stepped out of the taxi, paid the driver, and watched the Mercedes speed away, spinning gravel out from under its wheels. "Well, that was an interesting ride," Daisy muttered, as her sister, Poppy, engulfed her in a hug. "I think he was practising for the Monaco Grand Prix. Either that or he has a death wish." "That bad? Never mind, you're here now. Good flight?" Poppy asked. "Had better," Daisy said, hugging her sister back. "Oh, it's so good to be back down here with you. I miss having my bossy big sister around so much." "Bossy? Me? Never," Poppy answered, laughing. "Come on, let's get you indoors." "I'm sorry to land on you last minute like this," Daisy said. "I really couldn't face sharing a small apartment with Marcus and his cronies, and There's no hope of finding an empty hotel room in Cannes this week. Besides, I'd far rather stay here with you." "You know you're more than welcome any time," Poppy replied, "just so long as you don't mind camping out with Tom and me in the old cottage." At that moment, Tom himself came running out of the villa at full tilt before throwing himself at Daisy.
"Hi, Tom! How are you doing?"
Daisy picked up her young nephew and swung him around, before gently placing him back down on the ground.
"You, young man, are getting too big and heavy for swings.
Reckon you're strong enough to pull my suitcase down to the cottage?" Catching hold of his hand, she bent down and whispered in his ear. "There might just be some Lego in it, waiting to be unpacked." She and Poppy watched, smiling, as 6-year-old Tom started to pull the suitcase down the path. "So, who have you rented the villa to for the festival? Please tell me Aidan Turner and his family are going to be in residence," Daisy asked, turning to Poppy as they followed Tom down the path. "Sorry to disappoint you, but the villa has been booked in the name of Anna Carson. I've never heard of her, but that doesn't mean anything," Poppy answered. "You know what I'm like. I haven't got a clue about celebrities." "Anna Carson," Daisy said thoughtfully. "Nope, it's not a name that rings any bells with me either. Obviously not gossip column material. Where's Dan, by the way?" "Convenient business trip to America. You know how he hates the whole festival scene. When I was asked to rent the villa for a sum that'll put some money back in the coffers after all the renovations, he told me to go for it, but that he wouldn't be here." "Fair enough, I suppose," Daisy said, knowing her brother-in-law's views on film stars and so-called A-list personalities. "Makes life easier for you that way as well. When does this Anna Carson get here and take up residence?" "First day of the festival in the afternoon," Poppy answered. "She's asked me to arrange for a car to collect her." "So, we've still got the place to ourselves this evening and tomorrow morning," Daisy said. "We can at least have a swim, then, when I get back later. I need to go and collect my press pack and accreditation pass today. Tomorrow will be frantic. I told Marcus, the photographer, I'd see him down there at about 4 o'clock this afternoon." "Let's get you settled in the cottage, then," Poppy said. "Tom and I are sharing a bedroom. I put a click-clack bed on the mezzanine for you. Hope that's okay." Poppy glanced anxiously at her sister. "It'll be fine," Daisy assured her, and followed Poppy down the hidden narrow path, behind the swimming pool hedge, towards the corner of the garden where the cottage was hidden away from view by a bank of roses, their perfume filling the late afternoon air, as Daisy and Poppy walked past. Once a home for the full-time housekeeper and gardener who looked after the villa, the cottage had fallen into disrepair, and when Poppy and Dan had bought Villa Flora 2 years ago, both the properties were in dire need of some tender, loving care. The last time Daisy had visited, 7 months before, the villa had been finished, but the small cottage was still in a state of disarray. "Wow! What a transformation!" she said now, looking around the sitting room as they walked in. "First the villa and now this place. You should have been an interior designer. You've got such a good eye. I love the Provençal colour scheme in here," she added, looking around the sitting room with its terracotta floor tiles and yellow and blue furnishings. With French doors and windows down 2 sides, the room had a spacious feel about it, and Poppy's colour scheme and shabby chic furniture gave it a welcoming, homely feel. "Are you still planning to rent it out as a sheet?" Poppy nodded. "That's the idea. Renting out the villa as a one-off for this year." Daisy turned to Tom. "I'll carry the suitcase upstairs, Tom." Poppy led the way up a flight of wooden stairs in the far corner to the mezzanine, whose railing ran like a minstrel's gallery along the width of the room. Daisy put her laptop bag on the chest of drawers, standing between 2 varnished doors, and her suitcase on the floor. Tom, hopping from foot to foot, watched her anxiously as she unzipped it and pulled out a box. "Here you go, Tom. Add this to your collection." Tom gave a delighted whoop. "Thank you! Thank you!" And he ran downstairs to begin playing with his present. "I'm hoping this'll give you enough privacy," Poppy said, pulling open a decorative wicker screen that would hide from view the bed she'd placed at the end of the mezzanine. "There's the bathroom, and this is where Tom and I are sleeping," Poppy continued, opening one of the doors. "I've left some hangers for you to use in the wardrobe, so you can at least unpack. These drawers are empty," she said, indicating the chest. "I put towels and things out for you in the bathroom and—" "Poppy, stop fussing. You're sounding more and more like Mum," Daisy said. "It's all fine. Incidentally, have you spoken to Mum recently?" Poppy nodded. "She and Dad are hoping to come over at the end of the month. Apparently, Dad's won some tickets to see the Monaco Grand Prix. Goodness only knows where I'm expected to put them the first night." Poppy shook her head and looked at Daisy. "Anna Carson doesn't leave until the next day. You hungry? Fancy a sandwich?" "Please. And then I must think about walking down to Cannes." Downstairs, in the kitchen Poppy had created, in what had originally been a lean-to conservatory, Daisy picked up Oscar, Poppy's fat ginger and white cat, and absently stroked him as she looked out over the garden. "Is Anna Carson staying on her own?" Poppy shrugged as she concentrated on making sandwiches. "Some of the time. She's asked me to make up the bed in the master bedroom and one of the guest rooms, but just to leave bedding in the other 2 rooms in case she has guests. She's hoping her partner will arrive in the next couple of days. He's hiring a car at the airport, so at least I don't have to worry about organising transport for him." "Did she sound okay when you spoke to her? Or does she have showbiz attitude?" Daisy rolled her eyes in mock horror. Poppy laughed. "No, she sounded really nice, friendly and down to earth. Let's take these out into the garden." And she led the way out to the swing seat under the shade of the linden tree. "So, what's this photographer, Marcus, like? Replacement material for Ben?" Poppy asked, hopefully. Daisy laughed. "I doubt it. I've only met him a couple of times when he's called into the paper to see Bill, our editor. They're old friends, apparently, and he gets a lot of freelance work from Bill. He does have a bit of a reputation, as far as women are concerned, and I definitely don't want to be another notch on his belt. It's going to be strictly business for the next 10 days. It's been months since Ben Upton left you for the delights of Australia. Life goes on. It's about time you found someone else," Poppy said. "I just want to see my little sister settle down happily." "To be honest, I'm quite enjoying being single. Anyway, I don't think Marcus is my type. Far too flamboyant." Daisy hesitated, wondering whether to tell Poppy about the letter she'd stuffed in her bag, and decided she'd leave it until later, when they'd have more time to talk about it together. "Talking of Marcus, I better get going." "You can bring him back for supper if you like," Poppy offered. "I'd like to meet him, give him the 3rd degree, and see if he does have the potential to be a boyfriend for my little sister," she added. "No way," Daisy said. "Besides, you and I are having a girly evening before the film festival takes over my life for the next 10 days. Right, I better dash. See you later. Bye, Tom. Be good." Chapter 3. Cannes was in countdown to festival time, as Daisy walked along the Bord de Mer and made her way towards the Old Port and the Palais des Festivals. The events of the past few days had happened so fast, she could scarcely believe she was officially here, as a journalist, at one of the biggest annual show business events in the world. Summoned by the editor, Bill, into his inner sanctum late in the afternoon just 2 days ago, Daisy had been nervous, wondering if she was about to begin the sack over some faux pas or other she'd unintentionally made. But a distracted Bill had simply looked at her as he ran his hands over his thinning hair. "2 things. First, you got anything on for the next fortnight?" Without waiting for her answer, he'd continued, "If you have, cancel it." "Why?" Daisy had looked at him, shocked, wondering what was coming. "Damien, the bloody fool's broken his leg. I need you in Cannes for the film festival with Marcus. He's an old hand down there, so he'll fill you in on the details."
You want me to cover the Cannes Film Festival for the paper?
Daisy couldn't keep the surprise out of her voice. "You got a problem with that?" Daisy had shaken her head.
No, I'm just surprised you're giving me the job.
"I don't have a choice. Alex has family commitments and can't go. You're single and commitment-free. I hope."
Ah.
So she was second best.
But she didn't care. Covering the Cannes Film Festival would be a real step up from the dreary round of low-key reporting and the women's features she was usually handed. She'd been thrilled, joining the team on the small South Coast daily paper a couple of years ago, but covering local events and writing up the sentences handed out at the weekly magistrates' court was as exciting as it had got so far. "Definitely commitment-free," Daisy had replied.
"Marcus says the apartment he's renting's tiny, but you can squeeze in there with him and the others. Probably be an airbed on the floor, but—"
Bill had shrugged. "Not a problem," Daisy had said, knowing there was no way she'd even think about sleeping on the floor. She knew Poppy would find her a more comfortable bed than that. "My sister lives down there. I can stay with her." He said there were two things. Bill had picked up an envelope from his desk.
"You'll have heard the rumours about lots of changes here. This is your official notification of possible redundancies. Enjoy Cannes."
Having delivered the bad news in his usual brusque manner, Bill turned his attention to his computer screen and waved Daisy away. Daisy had left his office with mixed feelings, elated she had been given the opportunity to cover the Cannes Film Festival, and worried about her future afterwards. Later that day, though, once she'd opened the envelope and seen the offer of voluntary redundancy, thoughts of freelancing once again began stirring in her brain as she began packing for the festival. And now, here she was, in Cannes. She must remember to send Damien a postcard, teasing him about breaking his leg, and giving her the opportunity to report on Cannes. The palm tree-lined streets were more chaotic than usual, with nose-to-tail traffic stuttering its way around double-parked vans and lorries busy unloading last-minute supplies to various exhibition venues and traders. Luxury cars, Porsche, Bugatti, Aston Martins, all caught up in the gridlocked roads, attracted envious glances from pedestrians. Impatient, gun-toting gendarmes, standing in front of route barrée signs, directed frustrated motorists down narrow streets they knew would take them in the opposite direction to where they wanted to go. As she approached the Palais des Festivals, Daisy could see men busy sweeping and checking the condition of the red carpet that now covered the most famous flight of 24 steps in the world. Dodging the crowds that were milling aimlessly around, hoping to rub shoulders with the few stars already in town, Daisy made her way to the back of the Palais. She recognized Marcus at once, leaning against the railings, watching the crowds on the beach, his official photographer pass already strung around his neck, his camera at the ready.
"You settle in all right at your sister's place?"
Marcus asked after they'd greeted each other. Daisy nodded. "Yes, thanks. Where do I go to register?" Marcus pointed to a door in the Palais.
"Through there. You'll be ages. French paperwork and chaotic bureaucracy is at its best in there. I'll wait for you in the UK Film Centre Pavilion over in the Village International," he said, gesturing in the direction of the large marquee and other tents that had been set up along the embankment. "We'll go for a coffee afterwards and try to map out a plan of campaign."
"Plan of campaign?"
"As well as a daily report and photos, Bill wants us to try to unearth some unusual stories. A scandal would be good, he says." Marcus shrugged. "You know what editors are like, always wanting a scoop." Daisy was thoughtful as she made her way to register in the Palais office.
fingers crossed that she could do a good job and get her byline in the paper noticed. If she was made redundant, her future freelancing career could depend on her CV showing how good a journalist she was. Marcus was right. It was nearly 2 hours before Daisy escaped from the accreditation centre, her press pass finally around her neck and clutching a mountain of booklets and other assorted festival papers. When she eventually tracked Marcus down in the film centre marquee, he was with a group of men, all photographers, Daisy guessed, from the amount of camera paraphernalia surrounding them. "Hi guys, this is Daisy, my new partner in crime for the festival. I'll see you lot later. Daisy and I have to talk." Marcus picked up his large canvas bag, and Daisy followed him across the road to a pavement cafe in front of Square Broome, where they managed to grab a vacant corner table. "Deux cafés au lait, s'il vous plaît," Marcus ordered, raising his voice to be heard above the noise of a group of vocal Italians at the next table, some Russians who'd clearly been there for some time, sampling the house rosé, and a nearby crowd of Americans who seemed intent on taking over the place. A Japanese tourist was busy videoing the scene. "Hope he's got his sound switched on," Daisy said. "I've never heard so many languages all at once." "Heard the news about Philippe Cambon?" Marcus asked, as the waiter put their coffees on the table. Daisy shook her head. "The big shot film director? What's happened?" "Died of a heart attack in Los Angeles. There's going to be some sort of tribute later in the week. The powers that be haven't decided what yet. Do you know anything about Cambon?" "Only that he was French, was one of the top directors, wasn't married." She glanced at Marcus. "Wasn't gay, was he?" Marcus shrugged. "If he was, it was a well-kept secret. Had a reputation of loving women, but wouldn't commit to one. Anyway, I expect they've got all the info they need back at the office, but maybe you could do a couple of paragraphs about how the news has been received down here. Cannes was his hometown. Maybe interview a few who knew him. You know the score. Find a human interest angle, the school he went to, name of his first love, etc." Marcus drained his coffee and pushed the cup and saucer away before asking, "You got a press conference tomorrow?" "Not tomorrow. I'm hoping to get to a screening in the morning, and then I'm having lunch with a friend of Poppy's who works for Chanel. She's promised to give me the lowdown on some of the accessories and clothes they'll be lending the stars. So I should have a spare hour in the morning to try to see if I can find someone to talk about Philippe Cambon. Then in the afternoon I'll file my first daily report." "Don't forget to keep your ears open for any juicy gossip," Marcus said. "It's what this place is good for. And, like I said, Bill is keen to hear some of it." "As you're an old hand at this, Lark, where's the best place to hang out to catch the gossip? See people?" Daisy asked. Marcus might have a reputation as being a bit of a wild boy and overly fond of leather trousers, but he was a brilliant photographer and had done the festival for several years now.
"Any of the cafes and bars in town. This place is good," Marcus said, glancing around. "Occasionally some of the up-and-coming stars like to come down here and hang out with the bull players over there. Too much security these days for the famous ones to do that, unfortunately. Mind you, if Jack Nicholson's in town, he's known to like an early morning stroll along the Croisette by himself."
Marcus stood up.
"Right, I'm off. Want to come to a party tomorrow night? Bernard Audibert, who's a big name down here and knows anybody worth knowing's having his usual opening party bash, and I've got 2 tickets. It should be a good starting place for gossip. Meet me after the evening screening and we'll go together. 10:30, outside the Palais. Party's being held in Rue Victor Cousin."
"Sounds fun."
"He was a mate of Cambon's too, so that could be useful for your feature," Marcus added.
"I'll definitely try to be there then." Daisy hesitated. She really did want to spend the evening with Poppy, having a good catch-up, but felt she ought to at least make the offer for Marcus to join them. "Are you doing anything tonight? Poppy and I are planning a girly evening, but if you'd like to come to supper, I warn you, you're likely to get the 3rd degree from my big sister."
Marcus shook his head, Thanks, but I've arranged to meet the guys for a quick drink and then a reasonably early night. Doubt that I'll see bed much before 3 or 4 a.m. most days while the festival's on. Expect you'll find the same once you get into the swing of things." Unexpectedly, he leaned forward and kissed her cheek. "When in France and all that," he said. He picked up his camera gear. "If you need me urgently, you've got my mobile number, and you'll invariably find me in the paparazzi scrum at the side of the red carpet. We've got a definite dinner date one evening before the festival ends. Either the Carlton Terrace or the Palm Beach. You choose. Bill can pick up the tab. See you tomorrow night. Ciao." And he sauntered off in the direction of Palm Beach. Thoughtfully, Daisy watched him go. Well, that was definitely the most unromantic dinner date invite she'd ever had. But dinner at the Carlton would be an experience. Daisy gathered up her things and headed off in the opposite direction to Marcus. Passing the busy pizza restaurant on the corner brought back memories of the last time she'd eaten in there 7 months ago. The 4 of them, Poppy, Dan, Ben and herself, had been out for the evening at the end of their holiday. She'd been so happy that night. She and Ben had even talked about the possibility of moving to France or finding themselves a small cottage to do up and use as a holiday home. A first step on the property ladder together. It seemed like a logical next step to Daisy. They'd been a couple then for over a year. Nearly 18 months, in fact. Although they still both rented their own places, despite Ben spending more and more time with her. When Daisy suggested he move in with her as her flat was bigger than his, and they could save money for buying their own place, he said he'd think about it. They'd been back in the UK a week after that holiday, when her world had fallen apart. Apparently, all the talk that night of getting a mortgage, moving in together and settling down as a couple had freaked Ben out, and he told her it was all over between them. "I'm not ready for that sort of commitment, Daisy. I need some space." A few weeks later, it turned out that the space he craved was in Australia. Sydney, to be precise, which seemed to emphasise his desperation to get away from her. How ironic, then, that his first letters since then should arrive as she left to catch her flight down here, where they'd spent that happy holiday. Unsure of how to reply, Daisy had stuffed the letter into her bag. She'd get Poppy to read it later and see if she had any thoughts about Ben's latest suggestion. Standing with several people on the pavement in front of a busy road junction, waiting for a red pedestrian crossing light to change to green, Daisy smiled at a little girl, waiting with a tall man. "Nat, do you think Daddy will be at the house when we get back?" Daisy overheard the girl ask hopefully, looking up at the man. "Maybe, Cindy. His plane should have landed an hour ago and a car was picking him up to bring him straight to Cannes." "Good," Cindy said. "He can take me to the park tomorrow." "Sorry, Cindy. I think you'll have to make do with me for a few days. Daddy and Mommy are going to be really busy with the festival for the next week. That's why they've asked me to look after you." Daisy smiled sympathetically as the man looked up and saw her watching. He returned the smile, but didn't speak. Just then, the lights changed, and the small crowd surged forward. Once across the road, Daisy stopped, on the pretence of rummaging for something in her bag, and let the man and girl walk past her, curious to see where they were going. It was a few hundred yards or so before they stopped in front of a pair of large wrought iron gates, where the man pressed a security button high in the wall and spoke into the intercom. One of the dark green gates with its golden spikes on top swung slowly open, giving pedestrian access, and the two disappeared into a private garden. Daisy caught a glimpse of immaculate grounds, and, in the distance, a Belle Epoque villa, covered with bougainvillea, before the gate snapped shut behind them. Daisy strolled on past, and 10 minutes later, she and Poppy were sat at the table under the cottage loggia, with a glass of wine to hand, thumbing through the various film magazines and trade papers
Daisy had collected in Cannes. "So, you still enjoying being a journalist?" Poppy asked. Daisy hesitated long enough for her sister to throw her a curious glance, before saying, slowly, "Chasing after news stories is losing its appeal. Anyway, I mightn't have a job much longer. Bill gave me my official redundancy warning letter this week, which contained an offer of voluntary redundancy if I wanted to take it. There are rumours flying around at work about the paper actually folding. So, I'm seriously thinking of going freelance and finding some sort of specialism." She shrugged. "I could even move over here. I do love it down here. Live with you while I find something. I still like the idea of renovating a place, even if Ben couldn't hack it." "You could stay in the cottage if you wanted to be a bit more independent," Poppy said. "I know Dan would be pleased for me to have you near when he's away. His business trips seem to be on the increase. I, of course, would love a live-in childminder." She poured some more wine. "Any idea what you'd specialise in?" "Lifestyle? Property? Quite fancy the idea of getting to look around posh houses. Incidentally, there's this gorgeous Belle Epoque villa below you. Dark green gates with gold spikes. Do you know it? Saw a little girl and her minder disappearing in there earlier." "If it's the one I think you mean," Poppy said, "it's someone with either a lot of money, good connections, or both, staying there. It's one of the original grand 19th century villas along that road. It was bought last year by some Russian who spent a fortune renovating it. Apparently, it's now the latest word in 21st century opulence. Available only to those with the necessary funds." "Well, Daddy is clearly some festival VIP to warrant an official car. She'll have to do a bit of sleuthing tomorrow, I think," Daisy said. "The little girl's name was Cindy. Not that usual a name. Somebody's bound to know who her VIP father is. Maybe she's got a famous mother, too." "Don't any of your official booklets and papers have potted biographies of important people attending the festival?" Poppy asked. "Have a look, while I go and check Tom's asleep and fetch another bottle of rosé." When she returned, Daisy waved a booklet at her. "No luck with my mystery VIP, but I've found your Anna Carson. She's a well-respected production designer, worked on lots of films over the years, set up her own company a few years ago. Apparently, this is her first visit to Cannes." Later, sitting on the edge of her click-clack bed, balancing her laptop on her knees, Daisy updated her to-do list. Tomorrow she'd A. Go to a screening, B. Find someone to interview about Philippe Cambon, C. Talk to the girl from Chanel, D. Write up her first report, E. Go to Bernard's party, F. Try to uncover a scoop for Bill. She smiled ruefully to herself as she wrote, "uncover a scoop." She didn't doubt there would be several secret scandals floating around in a place like Cannes over the next week or so. But whether she was capable of unearthing one was something else. Chapter 4. It's Wednesday morning, and I'm sitting at a seafront cafe, croissant and coffee to hand, watching Cannes come to life on the first full day of the festival. The morning sky is the brilliant blue that gives this stretch of the Riviera its other name, the Côte d'Azur, and the forecast is for a sunny day. All around me, there are giant billboards advertising the films that'll be screening here over the next few days. Although only 7:35 a.m., there's a general sense of bustle everywhere. Queues are already forming outside boulangeries. Espresso machines are hissing into life, squirting the dark, strong liquid the French call coffee into small cups. People are arriving, bleary-eyed, back at their hotels and apartments, hoping to catch a few hours' sleep after partying the night away. Others, still bright-eyed and with a spring in their step, are on their way out to the first breakfast meetings of the festival. Daisy took a swig of her coffee and a bite of croissant before continuing to type the first of her daily reports on her laptop. I've collected all the daily trade magazines, signed up for a press conference tomorrow morning with a famous star. More of that later in the week. And now I'm off to view my first early morning screening. With over 120 films to be shown during the festival, things start early around here. Daisy pressed the save button and switched off. She'd add some more to it after lunch with the fashion assistant, who had promised to explain how the stars managed to acquire the necessary glitz for film premieres. After drinking the rest of her coffee, she set off for the Theatre Bazin on the third floor of the Palais des Festivals, where many of the press screenings would be held during the festival, far away from the glamour of the red carpet. Emerging 3 hours later, her head buzzing from both the film and the Q&A session with the filmmakers that had followed, Daisy joined the lunchtime crowds that were thronging the Croisette. Tourists and locals enjoying the spectacle of entertainers and starlets strutting their stuff, eager to catch the eye of any movie maker that might be around. As she walked, intriguing snippets of conversation floated in the air around her. Sharon was really upset when Michael gave the part to... Gosh, yes, a ticket to the Vanity Fair party would be to die for. Any chance of... No, we can't meet there. It's too risky. What if we were seen? Marcus was right. There was gossip everywhere. Surely that was Tom Hanks over there, talking to Bruce Willis? And that glamorous actress getting into a limousine looked incredibly like Meryl Streep. Wandering through the crowds, Daisy wondered again about the possibility of chasing down a scoop for the paper. She just wasn't that keen on investigative journalism. She told Poppy she much preferred to write feel-good stories about people, rather than write ones that besmirched them. Lingering near the carousel, she spotted the